Hey everyone, Ben Coomber Radio, episode number 185. Now, you as the listener, look, you know I care. I listen to your feedback when you say, oh Ben, we haven't heard about this on the show, it'd be really cool to have this kind of guest. And the ladies have been piping up. They've been putting their hand up and saying, look, we're not getting enough love and attention. There's been too much testosterone on the show recently. Because, yes, Rachel is my co-host and she's female, but she's a bit of a tomboy. She's probably got more testosterone than half the guys out there, and she'll freely put her hand and be proud to that. So we're going female orientated today. Very much so. We're going to be talking about women, pregnancy, that kind of stuff. So today, from Canada, I have Jessie Mundell on the show. Jessie, hello.
Hi, Ben. Thanks so much for having me on.
You are welcome. So we're repping the ladies today. Let's give a little bit of context, a little bit of background. Tell me, who is Jessie Mundell? What do you do? And what led you into the path and fired you up about what you do these days?
Sure thing. So I am a personal trainer, a kinesiologist, and I specialize in coaching women who are trying to conceive, who are pregnant, and women post-pregnancy who are moms. So I focus in strength training and specifically a lot in core and pelvic floor rehabilitation type work after pregnancy. And what really led me to this was that I started personal training back in my university days when I was doing a kinesiology undergraduate degree. And I started working with women in a prenatal and postnatal training studio. So it was only women who were coming to this studio who were pregnant or who were moms, and often they were bringing their babies to classes. So that was my first introduction really to seeing women in pregnancy who were exercising harder than I had seen before. So they were strength training, not just walking, not just yoga or Pilates, they were strength training. And then afterwards, they were trying to get back to exercise in this totally new and different life that they were now living. So that was kind of my first foray really into seeing this population work hard and exercise. And then from then I went on to do my master's degree in kinesiology and specialized in prenatal and postnatal exercise, and just started learning a whole bunch more at that point about the core, the pelvic floor, diastasis recti, pelvic organ prolapse, and started realizing that some of the things we were doing when I was training women at that personal training studio was probably not the best route of exercise for their bodies and their long-term function and health. So that really started to change how I viewed this population and the needs and considerations in exercise that they had. So for the last, I guess now, 6-ish years since my master's, I've been specifically focusing in training pregnant women and postpartum women and just dialing in the methods of how I do that and how I can best serve them and their bodies and their life.
Fascinating. We're obviously going to talk about the pregnancy thing, but let me hit it from a general perspective because I'm always interested to hear practitioners' kind of point of view, and I know you're on the other side of the pond to us, so things might look slightly different. What issues do you find that are prominent in female health as a whole? What should females bear in mind as a generalization when they're trying to get very healthy and high performing? And I suppose link that to kind of almost the common mistakes that you see with women and their health.
Mm-hmm. So not specifically pregnancy?
No, let's look general, global.
So I think one of the biggest things is just finding this middle ground between the all or nothing approach in food and exercise. That's the bulk of the mindset work that I do with my Girls Gone Strong coaching clients who are not specifically pregnant and postpartum. They are simply fitness clients who are trying to better improve their health, fat loss, get stronger, those types of things. And I think it's this need to view exercise and food as something they are going to do for life, something that they can really love and enjoy, and use those tools to support their bodies, and not use food and exercise as tools to control their bodies or specifically just to shape the appearance of them. So I think it's really just creating a healthier mindset around bodies, food, exercise, and how we can actually enjoy the way that we do these things.
Was there a point in your career as a practitioner where you'd almost learn a lot of the nuts and bolts of your trade, strength training, nutrition, that kind of stuff, and did you kind of get to a point where you said, look, I'm actually missing a chunk of how I can help women? And did you then seem to go down yourself kind of this mindset journey to fill in the blanks for your clients that weren't able to reach the success that you'd kind of planned for?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that for so long, I was struggling myself to find that balance between, is this enough exercise? Am I eating enough food? Am I eating too much food? It was such a stressful thing in my life for so long, and struggled with disordered eating and over exercising. So finding the balance myself was extremely tricky, and I had to go through a lot of these difficult times with my mindset to understanding that food and exercise could actually be something enjoyable that I loved and something that didn't cause me a whole lot of stress and shame. So once I started traveling down that path, and it was a lot of Jill Coleman from Jill Fit Physique, her mindset work that started taking me down this path to a more moderation style of eating and exercise. And I've now been working with her the last 3 years in more of a business coaching role. But it was her work that really started to make me turn the corner and started to make me get out of the binge and restrict, the eating clean Monday to Friday, and then being so drained of mental energy that I would just eat my way through the weekend and then feel like crap on Monday and start all over again. I thought I needed to exercise 5-6 days a week really intensely, and my body just felt terrible and injured all the time. So it was when I started to break down these ideas for myself of what a fitness professional should look like, should exercise in a certain manner, how a fitness professional should eat. Once I started to break down those rules for myself, then I found I could better help my clients do that in their own lives.
See, I think for me this is quite a prominent thought process of mine right now in fitness, and I've just spoke at FitPro over the weekend, and I did a seminar on clean eating versus if it fits your macros, which is in the kind of general fitness world is a great topic because, as you know, clean eating's been this massive trend, and as fitness professionals and people that are just into health and fitness in general have latched onto this clean eating thing, and it's been popularized to a point that we need to do this to a perfection level. And if we don't do it to perfection level, then we fail. We try and do the clean thing 100% of the time, and at some point we're going to come unstuck. We're going to fail. It's going to be a weekend. It's going to be a bar mitzvah. Who knows? How do you kind of cue or make a couple of probing questions for people with this mantra? Because definitely in females, I see females put a lot of pressure on themselves to be perfect. And it's a massive blocking or restriction factor for them because they can't see around that, and then there's guilt associated with it. It seems like a big problem.
Yeah, it really, really is. And I think that they think that it's all or nothing, 100%. They either have to be eating perfectly, the chicken, broccoli, salad, those types of things, every meal of their lives for every week for the rest of their life. Or if they're not, then it's exactly that. They've failed, and what's the point in even trying? It's the getting back on track that they feel like they have to do every week because they have failed. But really, it's simply that they're just trying to be so strict with themselves, and their mental energy just runs dry. And then they have nothing left in the tank to be able to actually make a more moderate eating choice, for example. So I think the biggest key of the puzzle for me that I try to communicate with my clients is that it actually is hard at first to start transitioning to a more moderate style of eating. It takes a lot of work. It takes work to figure out what works for your life and for your body. It takes work to trust yourself and just know that you can get through the next meal, the next day, the next week, just simply eating and understanding how that food makes you feel in terms of your hunger energy and cravings. So I think that so many of my clients, they just want the meal plan. They want it set out. They want me to tell them this is exactly what I want you to eat for every meal. And it won't work for especially the women that I see in the long term, especially the busy mom. There's no way that I could have them do that in those early wild postpartum days when your hunger is all over the place. If you're sleeping for an hour at a time intermittently throughout the night, we need to train these moderate eating behaviors so that when these life things do come up, and they're going to come up, you might be pregnant, you might go on vacation, you might have a newborn that won't sleep if you put them down. These life things are going to happen. And if we can have these habits and behaviors in terms of nutrition and exercise to get us through and not the meal plan, it's just so much more successful in the long run.
Yeah, when I came off the back of what I was speaking about at the weekend, I intimated that this is where, and we've seen this trend recently in fitness, that everything that we've been doing is becoming slightly more scientific. There's been less opinion, less hearsay. And I said to everyone, I said, look, regardless of what you eat and how you go about it, you need to underpin what you do in the grounding science. Now, we understand that the calorie balance is very important. You eat too much, you'll get fat. So if you slip out of clean eating, whatever your paradigm of eating is, if you know that you can keep your eating under control, you can have faith and confidence and not feel guilty that if you do something else, as long as there's that key underlying principle, you'll be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to move on fast. And that's what I always tell my clients. If there is a slip up, there's an extra treat, you eat past 80% full, it's going to be okay. Absolutely going to be fine. There's no damage done. We just move on quickly. We move on to the next meal because there's always another opportunity to then eat a meal that is, say, more health promoting, a meal that is moving you further towards your goals. So we can't get tripped up in the small details. We think big rocks and we just move on faster.
Okay. Let's move specifically on pregnancy because I want to make sure we've got enough time to hammer this today. I kind of asked you the general question of what mistakes you see females making in general. Let's apply that to pregnancy in the kind of post-pregnancy period, because I think the mindset around women is that they tend to feel that they're okay leading up to pregnancy. It's afterwards. It's that return back to normal. What mistakes do you see people commonly making to get back their health and their body?
Right. It falls along the same vein, to be quite honest. It's jumping back in to a more intense exercise, a more restrictive style of eating very soon after pregnancy, when the body simply needs this long period of recovery and rehabilitation time. So I think women often feel pressure externally or internally to basically make it look like they never had a baby. And it's sad and unfortunate that we have to feel that way. So really the issues arise when women do jump back into that more intense style of exercise, the intense cardio, the running, the lifting heavy weights again, before they've taken a good chunk or period of time to rehabilitate their core and pelvic floor, to develop a strong foundation from the inside out of their bodies, and just simply to allow their body to recover from the intensity and sometimes some trauma to the body from pregnancy, labor, and birth. So that's what I'm seeing, and it's really what I feel my role is giving women permission to not have to go down that road, to have them understand that exercise post-pregnancy does not have to be intense, hard, to make your body feel worse than it did. You don't have to live with these nagging injuries and issues forever, and just to get them doing more smart, sane exercise.
Let's involve men a little bit in this conversation, in the fact that, is there a point to be discussed where women feel pressure and anxiety when, I would say, assumptions are made in an environment? So women might have a baby, she then has this kind of urge and pressure to get back her pre-pregnancy weight, And because it's not really discussed or communicated, especially in a loving way with us, the spouse, the partner, they just go off on this journey themselves. And as men and as people in a relationship, and this isn't just about pregnancy, I think we can expand this, that a man needs to sort of be able to say to the female, look, I'm here for you throughout this process. You don't have to do anything too quickly. You've been through a massive ordeal. Can we hold the men accountable a little bit here?
Yeah, I love that you said that, actually, because my husband and I have had this conversation so many times, and he's in deep. He hears me talk about this stuff all the time, so he's totally on board with this mindset, and he'll talk about the pelvic floor and diastasis recti, so he gets what has happened to my body, and I think that it gives him a totally interesting perspective on what I've been through. But he always is saying stuff about how he loves my big body and how it's squishier and chunkier, and he loves that. And for me, that I'm super confident in myself and my body exactly how it is, but that just gives me an extra level of comfort. I think that he loves my body at any shape, stage, does not matter at all. He loved my body at 42 weeks pregnant when it was huge, and now he loved it through the early postpartum period. He loves it now. It doesn't matter what my body looks like. He just wants me to feel a certain way, and that's all that's important to him. So I think that we talk about this with my coaching clients who are specifically pregnant and post-pregnant too, is having these conversations with their partners about if they are feeling uncomfortable with their own bodies, and getting their partners to help lift them up. Because sometimes I think that these women are scared, honestly, that their partners aren't going to love their bodies if they look differently. And the reality is their body simply is going to look differently, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just different. It's not bad. And so I think that if the partner can support them through that mentally, emotionally, it does help for an easier transition into this new body.
The reason why I bring this up is because I think talking about relationships or the dynamics between different people is a hugely important topic, but something that people shy away from even talking about because they don't know if it's within their remit. Like, I'm no relationship counsellor, I'm just a coach with a varied background, but I just, in every situation in life, things only screw up if you don't talk about it enough or don't talk about it at all. And and that's when it gets worse. People pickle their emotions. They start to overthink it. Now they can't sleep. Now they're stressed. Now they're aggravated. And just the whole world could be solved so much of the time with communicating more.
Yes, and it's so funny that we're so resistant to having those conversations that we're having internally with our own bodies and our own self, to having them with our partners and relationships too. It's almost like we're scared to admit that we're thinking that way about our own bodies, but maybe we don't want our partner to know that we're scared and thinking that way about our own bodies. So I totally agree with you. If we just start having the difficult conversations, and they can be difficult, and that's just hard in itself to even initiate it, but I think it goes such a long way. And another key piece of the puzzle, I think, in this is also for women to have these conversations with their girlfriends, and not just simply to talk about their bodies with their girlfriends, about beating them down and saying nasty and negative things about themselves, because women love to do that with each other. And I always encourage my clients to stop having those conversations, to start changing the dynamic in the conversations with their girlfriends, start talking about things that they love about their bodies, especially after they've had babies, because we need to know that it's possible to love your body after a baby, even if it's bigger and different. So let's start changing that conversation as well.
Powerful communication, people. So we'll come back to the kind of post-pregnancy thing. You've mentioned that an awful lot of people tend to go too hard too quick, and we actually had a question on last week's podcast about this, about a woman who had babies like years ago, and she'd got into training literally straight away, and ever since then she'd just not stopped and just been going relentlessly. And I just sort of said, I was like, it almost felt like she hadn't even stopped to contemplate that she'd had a child and that her body had gone through a massive amount of stress. Now, let's say she hadn't done that. Does your advice change at all for someone that's maybe waited a year or two and now she's like, oh dear, right, now I need to get on the bandwagon, so to speak. I need to kind of gear myself up. Does your advice change?
It could. It really does depend on the situation in her life, first and foremost. And what I mean by that is, how much is she sleeping? Is she taking care of herself with nutrition? What is the rest of her body feeling and functioning like? But for me, the same rules apply whether it's super early postpartum, say 4 to 6 weeks, or if she is even 12 months postpartum, 14 months postpartum. The same rules apply in that we need to address the core and pelvic floor function first before we start loading the body in heavier type exercises, more intense type exercises. And it's just like if you were training a beginner exerciser, really, is that we need to develop a strong foundation and then build on it and strategically and progressively adapt those loads. So that's how I view it. But I think that she could potentially be able to handle more stress if she's further out from postpartum, hasn't been exercising at all. For sure, we might be able to progress a little bit more quickly than we would someone who is in those early hazy days postpartum where she's not sleeping very much. The nutrition is just trying to get anything into her body that she can with one hand throughout the day. So definitely it can be some different situations, but first and foremost, we have to address the core and pelvic floor function before we start jumping back into the running, the heavy lifting, the CrossFitting.
So you mentioned this a lot. Fascinating topic, because when I was a young trainer, we were going through this cycle in the fitness industry that everything was about squats and deadlifts and, don't waste your time rolling around on the floor and activating. Just do a squat because it does everything. And this is so far from the truth. And now I really appreciate some of the work that physios and therapists do, because I've just been through a big block of training myself where I've had to really work hard at actually even just being able to engage my lower abs. They didn't work properly. My hip flexors always took over. My scapular muscles didn't contract properly. And if I did a row or I did a squat, that's not going to activate by itself. You've got to tell the body to do something and then you've got to integrate it. I feel like I've missed out so much of my physical development by kind of skipping that afterthought. With women that are in this situation, where do you point them for good resources? I'm assuming you might have some good resources on pelvic floor, the core, that kind of stuff.
Yes. So I have a program called Core Plus Floor Restore, and now there's also a C-section specific version of that program because I just went through this myself. But it's essentially to start rehabilitating the core and pelvic floor and to get women back to all the fun exercise they like to do is how I like to communicate it to them. So we have to do these baby steps before we jump back into the fun and the bigger stuff. But also I would encourage them to look at Diane Lee, and she's a pelvic floor physical therapist in Canada. Julie Weeb, who is also a women's health physio in the United States. Those are two of the women that I love following because their work is so tied into postpartum, the core and pelvic floor, how the body is functioning. And I think that we need to keep talking about this function first idea of returning to exercise. And then there's also some fabulous people doing great work in pregnancy exercise as well. Fit to Be, pregnancy exercise, Lorraine Scapins from Australia. There's lots of women who are doing really good stuff. I know that the fitness industry can be littered by some unfortunate exercise in pregnancy and postpartum specific, like it can with every other population, but there's really great stuff happening and coming up.
In terms of a timeline, if this woman's listening to this, let's say she's 8 months pregnant and she's starting to almost plan in her head her, let's say 9 months after pregnancy, is there a general timeline where you sort of say, well, for kind of 2 months you need to be doing this and then we can start to do this, and then at month 5, I would try and do this if I was your coach? Can you put timelines on any of this?
I think you can, especially if we do have someone who is later in pregnancy. I know exactly what they are going to be doing early postpartum and how I'm going to train them through that period. I think that generally speaking, we do almost hit these milestones. So for me, I don't love the advice that you should wait 6 weeks until that 6-week checkup with your doctor postpartum before you start doing anything. I just don't think it's necessary in most cases. For most of my women, for myself included, start back to some specific core and pelvic floor exercise in the early weeks postpartum, even at 2 weeks postpartum. And I did that at 2 weeks post C-section as well. So essentially we start getting the core and floor to start rehabilitating early on, as early as possible, as early as the woman is comfortable. So I like an 8-week period of daily core and pelvic floor exercise, about 8-ish minutes a day, 10 minutes a day. But at the same time, say around the 4 to 6 weeks postpartum mark, we can actually start putting some more real workouts back into their routine. And that's going to be very much rehab focused, but it's things like body weight squats, band rows, just some gentle, light stuff that gets their body moving in different planes, in different ways, feels to them like they're doing a bit of extra movement, helps them mentally, emotionally, physically. So, and then from there, we just keep progressing. I like women to stay on the same phase of workouts for 4 weeks, strength training usually about 2 times a week, mastering those movements, those exercises, seeing how their body adapts to them, and then we progress into the next 4-week phase. So I didn't add any weighted exercises in with actual dumbbells until probably 8-ish weeks postpartum, and it was super light stuff, some goblet squat work, some rowing exercises, some chest presses from the floor. And then if we're talking bigger milestones, it was squatting with a barbell again at around 4.5, 5 months postpartum, deadlifting from the floor at 6 months postpartum. So yeah, we do have some set guidelines of when we can add this stuff back in if the body is feeling well and functioning well.
Cool. I'll tell you what, I'm probably more fascinated in myself, probably because this is more likely to happen sooner for me. Yeah, call it a little bit selfish. And hopefully women do this. When someone comes to you and they're like, look, Jessie, I'm thinking of having a baby, year, maybe 2 years into the future, what would you say, right, I really want you to get this sorted and you want to make sure this area of your health is okay, and actually it might be beneficial to go and get this test to make sure that, you know, these levels or something isn't a problem. Is there almost like a building process that you like to try and get people to optimal in before they even get pregnant?
Mm-hmm. My number one advice for this is to get strong. I think that if we get a strong body, and I mean muscularly, physically strong, leading into pregnancy when we're going to have to reduce the loads, which we're training, and do that postpartum as well, I just see such better results for women in terms of how comfortable they are in their bodies in pregnancy and how their recovery goes postpartum if they were lifting weights regularly and consistently before pregnancy. I think that that's the thing that I like to see most often. Get strong, really develop solid habits around exercise and nutrition too, going back to that whole eating more moderately type thing, because once you become pregnant, things are thrown for a loop a little bit. You might be sick, you might be nauseous, your hunger is completely different, your cravings can be very, very different as well. So first of all, we get strong, we develop solid habits with exercise that help carry us through that difficult period in early pregnancy or end of pregnancy where nothing really feels super comfortable in exercise, and helping us recover postpartum. And then also going back to that nutrition piece of the puzzle is understanding how food makes you feel, developing really solid habits around nutrition in general, such as eating protein every time you eat, eating veggies at 2 or more meals a day. If we develop these habits, I see that women have an easier time managing how their body feels and during pregnancy. And just by that, I mean not having tons of pelvic pain, back pain, aches, and stuff like that, but also managing that mental transition between having your body to yourself, growing a human in your body, and then having a human to take care of after pregnancy. Those habits and behaviors, if we can master those before leading into pregnancy, I think women have an easier transition mentally and emotionally through those times.
You talked about strength, obviously. Now, that for me, when you said that, I thought kind of macro, I thought big. Would you also recommend doing some of the core and pelvic stuff that you recommended so your rehab is almost quicker?
Yes, I think that is also extremely helpful in women's bodies. And I think that what I love to see too, even if a woman is pregnant right now and listening to this, understanding that the core rehab work that I talk about, I think it happens all throughout pregnancy. We really don't even take a break from it. So it happens during pregnancy, and we transition right into post-pregnancy of rehabilitating and retraining the core. And especially if we can do that even before becoming pregnant, understanding that alignment is so key for pelvic floor and core function, understanding how to feel relaxation in our pelvic floor before getting pregnant, knowing that their exercise technique is key, but also everything that they're doing in their daily life, how they're sitting, are they tucking their bums under constantly throughout the day. That stuff is so key as well. I also love teaching those exercises that we're going to be doing post-pregnancy to rehab their body before they get pregnant and through that pregnant time as well, so they know what to do. They have their plan set by the time they do get post-pregnant.
Fascinating. Well, Jessie, thank you very much for sharing your insight today on the show. If people want to find your work, social media, websites, plans, programs and stuff, where can they come and find you?
My main site is jessiemundell.com, and that is where my blog is hosted, and tons of information there on training in pregnancy and postpartum. And then I also have a program which is a monthly membership site, and that is specifically for coaching pregnant and post-pregnant women, and that is called topregnancyandbeyond.com. And then I'm also an advisor for Girls Gone Strong, which is just a fantastic site for all things health and fitness for women. So that is girlsgonestrong.com, and I write specifically for them about prenatal and postnatal exercise info.
Nice. And social media, Facebook, Twitter, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, Facebook, you can find me at Mundell Lifestyles, and Instagram at Jessie Mundell.
Awesome. Well, people, if you've enjoyed what Jessie's had to say today, then look her up. Have a look at her information. It sounds like she's written a ton of blogs. If you're unsure on how to spell her name, it's Jessie Mundell. So you can kind of get that right when you're using the old Google machine. Also, if you're a coach or a PT or you're a real nutrition geek, then Jessie actually teaches on our Body Type Nutrition Academy. She goes into a lot of depth in this. So if you want to find out more about our online nutrition course, the Academy, you can text 67076, or you can check it out at bodytypenutrition.co.uk. And all that does is for me to say, Jessie, thank you very much again.
Thank you, Ben.
And for everyone else listening on the show, next week's show will be my second Part 2 Confessions podcast. Tune in, do not miss it. Ciao. Hey everyone, Ben Coomber Radio, episode number 184 in the house. Got the number correct, we're rolling. I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Rachel Guy. Rachel Guy, hello.